जरा हाथ पकड़ के रखे बेटा मेरा।
किले वाली मस्जिद बोलती थी पहले, मतलब पहले टाइम में ये किले वाली मस्जिद बोलती थी। अब ये दोबारा आबाद कराई है मस्जिद इन्होंने।
If you rent a room here, you don't want to leave it, and you will live in there for centuries. All you people will buried there, and all you know, you love the place you live.
समय ऐसा था कि वाकई वो निगाह से जाता नहीं है, वो आ जाता है, सपने में भी कई दफ़ा आ जाता है। हम जा रहे हैं, जो लेने में आए थे शेर खां का, जो लड़के का नाम शेर खां था, उसका फादर और एक और आदमी, कुल्हाड़ियाँ उन्होंने पकड़ी हुई है, बहुत डरावना उनका शक्ल, और वो हमें बिठा रखा है उन्होंने, दोनों भाइयों ने अपने मोड़े पे ले जा रहे हैं। रास्ते में आग लगी हुई है, कई घरों में आग लगी हुई है, और वो फिर उस हवेली में पहुँचे। हवेली का दरवाज़ा याद है, और लोग आ रहे हैं, पठान लोग रात को धक्के दे रहे हैं उसको, आवाज़ आ रही है थोड़ी बहुत। वो कह रहा है कि जब तक मैं हूँ यहाँ कोई नहीं अंदर आ सकता। मेरे पास नहीं है, मेरे पास कोई आदमी हिंदू नहीं है, और है भी सही, तो मेरे को मारोगे तो तब तुम अंदर घुस सकते। तो रात कैसे गुजर गई, फिर क्या हुआ, फिर उसके बाद हिंदुस्तान की कहानी आ गई।
The man you just saw in the video is my Nanu. When he was just 7 years old, he was forced to migrate from a small village in modern-day Pakistan called Bela and moved to New Delhi. Actually, I'd see him in the corner of our house in Delhi. He'd be, in his diary, he'd be scribbling Urdu. And I'd ask him, Nanu, you know how to write Urdu? And he'd say yes, like this is what we learnt at school, but he'd close the diary quickly and say, but now that time is gone.
मुझको है तेरी जुस्तजू, मुझको तेरी तलाश है, जाने जहाँ कहाँ है तू, मुझको है तेरी जुस्तजू।
So I've always had this sense of hankering of figuring out along that journey what changed. What took these communities that had been living for centuries together and turned them into enemies overnight. We wanted to go beyond just talking about the partition. We wanted to take these people back home.
Virtual reality seemed the perfect solution to our problem because of the fact that we could take people back without them having to physically go there. India and Pakistan, 72 years after partition, still do not operate a tourist agreement. And so for most people, going and revisiting their childhood homes is out of the question. Old age and traumatic memories and general fear linked to going back still hold back hundreds of thousands of people who've not been able to go home after 72 years.
My grandfather, my father, my other people, same generation, they were always upset about this thing. They never got themselves settled down mentally. वाह जी वाह, वाह जी वाह। बेटा आपने ये मेरा बचपन याद करा दिया। एक एक जगह अब तो नहीं, वो जगह नहीं पहचानता, वो तो बदल गई तो, लेकिन वो मस्जिद पहचानता हूँ, ये दरबार मान दो, इसको शाह हुसैन का दरबार कहते थे।
जो पुरानी मस्जिद थी
जो
वो
पुरानी
आपको याद है?
मुझे याद है अच्छी तरह। अच्छा तो
नो, इट इज़ एन इमोशनल एक्सपीरियंस अपने बचपन की वो देखना।
Soda, how often do you think about your home?
You won't believe if I tell you something. Almost every day. I really had a shock. You will not be surprised how upset we were to know that we are going to Pakistan.
So when we were tracking Saida Siddiqui's story in Lucknow, her house was now a series of apartment blocks that had been constructed about 30 years ago. And yet opposite that house was the peepal tree that she remembered playing under, still there on the side of the road. And underneath the peepal tree was the mandir, which still had the same family who had lived there for the last 72 years. And we found the pundit who remembered playing with Saida as a child. And we managed to reconnect them after 72 years.
हाँ, पीपल का पेड़ अभी भी है। पीपल का पेड़ अभी लगा हुआ है, मंदिर है, और उसके पहले जो बाउंड्री थी वो सब खत्म हो चुकी है। अब आने का प्रोग्राम है कि नहीं आपका? हेलो, हमने क्यों भगा दिया? वाह वाह, ये आपने अच्छा कहा। आपने खुद ही अपने सब लोग निकल लिए, चले गए सब। अब हमारे यहाँ सब हाँ बिल्कुल, घर आपको आता है, हमें भी पुराने लोगों को याद आता है, तो हमारे सब उसका खेल समझते हैं। समझ गए, हम पुराने लोग हैं, हमारे लोगों के सामने हमारे आप लोगों का काफी यानी व्यवहार और प्रेम चलता था।
तो हमारे पास सोना चांदी वो थी, वो मैंने उस 11 बरस की उम्र में एकदम लॉस्ट रूम के अंदर खड्डा खोद के उसके अंदर डाल दिया था। क्योंकि ऐसा थोड़ा कि हम वापस नहीं आएंगे, हम तो वापस आने के लिए गए थे लेकिन वापस नहीं आ सके।
We begin by interviewing the partition witnesses. We then get our cross-border volunteer network to track down the locations and try to find any areas which may have survived. 72 years later, a lot of the places have changed. Both countries have industrialized massively since 1947. And yet there's always something which remains in each of these villages or towns, wherever we've been. There's a mosque, a well, a mandir. Maybe the neighbour's house survives. After this, we send our filming team out to recapture the areas which do still survive.
We're now off to Nankana Sahib, one of the holiest sites for Sikh pilgrims in Pakistan. We're here in Lawrence Gardens, which is also known as Bagh-e-Jinnah in Lahore. This is where Trilochan Singh, one of our partition witnesses, would go for his morning run.
And we then edit it into a full 6-minute experience. This is then taken back to the original partition witness, shown to them, and then exhibited more broadly to the general public in order to educate about partition and about the stories of those who've survived it.
But in order to educate people, we can't just show them these places, we've got to contextualize the whole experience. So we came up with Child of Empire. Child of Empire isn't just a 360 experience of these places as they exist today. Instead, it's an interactive, animated journey through the partition as if you were a child actually migrating. So you're not just watching the experience of the migration, you are the migrant. And any action you take along the way will influence the narrative.
I left my mother country in my childhood and had long sufferings, so I do not believe anyone. Because this was happened forcibly on me by some other persons. Who are they? The political leaders.
अभी वो जाने का तो कोई मतलब नहीं है. अभी आप इससे लेके जाएंगे तो वो चले जाएंगे उधर.
क्या? काजी महल्ला जाके देखना है. काजी महल्ले जाना है देखने वास्ते. उम्मीद नहीं है. सिचुएशन ऐसी है कि वो नहीं चल सकता.
No way, nothing there. Because it was the atmosphere that's finished. A lot of those people have died. You see, they've disappeared.
The partition was for the politicians.
एक कुर्सी की खातिर, एक हुकूमत की खातिर लोग क्या क्या कर जाते हैं. ये नहीं सोचते कि इसका अंजाम क्या होगा.
Purpose of this project is to strip away the layers of politics and bureaucracy that's been built up around the issue of partition over the last 72 years and just look at the issue with the eyes of a child who just wants to go home.
And one of the things we've learned throughout this entire journey is just how absurd it is that it takes a team of 30 volunteers spread across 5 different countries with the world's most cutting-edge technology to take back grandparents who literally live just across the border. To all the people out there watching this video, we have just one message. In an ideal world, a project like this shouldn't exist.